Welcome in, everybody, to the CFB Nation All-America podcast. I'm Bill Trocchi, senior editor at sportingnews.com, alongside Bill Bender, our national college football writer at sportingnews.com and president of the Football Writers Association of America. We're coming to you live on our CFB YouTube channel again. Thanks to Brian Driscoll at Irish Breakdown for setting it up for us. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, go to search CFB Nation and click subscribe. We're coming to you from Charlotte. We're at the ACC Media Days. Bill's in his hotel room. I'm in my hotel room. Internet a little shaky. I forgot my adapter, so I don't have my microphone. So we're going to do our best here to give you a good show. Maybe we'll have another one Friday for you if it's a disaster, technologically speaking. But, Bill, are you excited to be here in Charlotte?
Yeah, we got through day one yesterday. The ACC puts on a great event, in Charlotte. They do a great job. The hospitality is amazing. We're in the Hilton, 5 teams yesterday, 5 today, 5 tomorrow. And just great access, great time. And, that goes large part to the ACC staff and the event they put on here. And I think, it should be a fun day here on day 2.
Yeah, I think unlike the SEC, where it's just so crowded, it's hard to get good conversations with coaches and players and things like that. I'm looking forward today to the breakout sessions and really having some good conversations with guys that you don't really get at SEC, just like I said, because there aren't like individual, there's just so much media with the radio and the TV. They sweep those guys off once they finish with the podium. And so you can get some stuff for sure, but not quite as much, I think, as we do at the ACC. All right, let's get into Trocchi trivia. I will ask you an ACC-themed question that we will get to the answer at the end of the show. But let's see how you can do. There are 6 ACC schools that are welcoming back their returning starter at quarterback. Can you name all 6 teams? So think about that as we go through the show. There are 6 quarterbacks who are coming in as a returning starter here in the ACC for 2025. So, all right, Bill, you were here yesterday. I got here last night. Tell me about, you saw Miami, you saw Carson Beck. He was clearly the story. Everybody kind of wrote about him. He's coming in from Georgia off his injury. He's taken the baton from Cam Ward, trying to get Miami into the playoffs. What did you think of his session, and kind of what were people talking about Miami yesterday?
Yeah, I would argue he was the kind of the story of day one. He definitely is the most intriguing transfer quarterback in the country. When you go from the record where he lost 3 games at Georgia the last 2 years, including 2 to Alabama, to Miami, and that makes him very interesting. And he's following Cam Ward, but I thought he was impressive on the podium, impressive in the breakout session. He talked very fondly about his time at Georgia. He wasn't like bitter. There was none of that. And then he seemed excited about Miami. The phrase Mario Cristobal used was he marries well what they want to do schematically with who he is. So I thought he was very good. Probably the highlight of day one was Carson Beck. And, they've got some talented players at Miami, a chance to build on last year's 10-win team. So, yeah, I think that was definitely the lead story. And I'd say followed closely by SMU and Kevin Jennings and Rhett Lashley and what they do for an encore in year 2 in the ACC.
Carson Beck's going to get tested right away. Sunday night, Labor Day weekend against Notre Dame.
For sure. And, Cristobal didn't really talk about Notre Dame. He said the focus is more within. But I think for Carson Beck, it's certainly a prove-it year. He threw 12 interceptions last year. I would argue that some of that was, losing Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey and having a completely different receiving core. But it definitely is one of those change of scenery stories that we'll all be watching in week 1. Because if Miami can beat Notre Dame at home at Hard Rock, Stadium in Miami Gardens, it vaults them into the top 10, maybe even the top 5. So it's a huge game. That's a huge stage. A lot of people are going to be keeping an eye on CJ Carr on the other sideline, but it sneaks up on you that Carson Beck's in his 6th year of college football. So they definitely have the experience advantage there.
Did you see Mark Richt's line to him during the ACC, one of the ACC huddle or whatever the show was? He said, you were at Georgia and now you're at Miami. He said, I was at Georgia, then I went to Miami. He said, the difference between us, though, is that I think you made more money at Georgia than I did.
he probably – that's probably not all that true. So, or not all that untrue. Mark Richt did very well at Georgia and Miami as well. So I think, that's one of the storylines to keep in mind. And can the Hurricanes break through and get to the playoff? They're much like Florida in the SEC, one of those fringe top 10 teams. So we'll see how they respond and how Carson Beck responds. I know that, we had him number 1 in our quarterback rankings in 2024, and we weren't the only one. He's number 13 in 2025. So there's a lot to prove. And I think the other thing I would say is, even Cristobal mentioned this, is, Carson Beck has a lot of big game experience, and Miami's only beat one top 10 team the last 3 years under Mario Cristobal. So that's where they're going to need him most, in those big game settings.
All right. So tangentially speaking, I don't know why I thought of this, but Carson Beck, we saw him with Brock Bowers and without Brock Bowers, right? And it made me think of Drew Aller over at Penn State. We saw him with Tyler Warren. Now we're going to see him without Tyler Warren. Now, I know we're talking ACC here, but I just thought it was interesting to think about, Drew Aller has all these preseason accolades and stuff like that, but he lost a valuable tight end. And we already saw what happened with Carson Beck when he lost his valuable tight end. So I don't know what's going to happen there. So, all right, day 2 here at ACC. We got Florida State going. What do you expect to hear from them? They were 2-10 last year, beyond horrible. Their offense was, just could not move the ball no matter what. They only have one returning starter, according to Athlon Sports, on the offensive side of the ball, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, coming off 2-10, and obviously with Thomas Castellanos taking over at quarterback, it can't be much worse. I do think they're the story of day 2. How do you come back from a 2-10 season? Is this just part of the transfer portal era, where when you have that many guys come in and out that you may have a season like that? How much pressure is actually on Mike Norvell, who was on the hot seat before the 13-1 season, and now probably right back on it after a 2-10 season. There's been few swings like that in the last several years in college football. So I think they will be the story. I think I want to hear what Thomas Castellanos has to say about adjusting to Florida State. So interesting. He's kind of one of the guys that's responsible for that early season slide when BC went into Tallahassee and ran all over them. So I'm interested to hear his perspective on what he thinks and why he's there and how that goes.
What do you think about him running his mouth so much, talking about how he's going to, run all over Alabama? And the Alabama guys have heard it. We'll put it that way. They saw it at SEC Media Days. I was there for Alabama's day, and someone asked one of the defensive players about Castellanos' comments in the offseason, and he said, it will be dealt with.
Yeah, that's only going to be talked about if they lose. And yeah, you have to. If I was Florida State, I'd probably keep it a little buttoned up, coming off 2-10 and playing a superpower like Alabama. Now, if Nick Saban's coaching, they would have used that more, I think. That's again, talk is cheap. We all know that, and they've got to go out and play the game. And I think he probably knows that too. So, what a week 1 game, and we're right back to it with Florida State early in the season with that monster matchup with Alabama. I was there the last time they played Alabama it was the Chick-fil-A kickoff game at the time, and that was that big game between Florida State and Alabama. That was a good game, but of course Alabama won.
What do you think Gus Malzahn's going to bring to the table for FSU? Like you said, that the offense needed a complete overhaul, and I think he's there to provide it.
He's good with quarterbacks that can run. There's no question. And he's good with tempo and having, teams go fast. So I think that's something to watch, that their offense will improve with Gus Malzahn. That's a high, I mean, you can't ask for a more high-end offensive coordinator to get things turned around. So I do think that will have an impact. Now, you could counter that with, our Gus Malzahn passing offense is good enough. It depends. I mean, when you have a quarterback as dynamic as Castellanos, and he can get the ball out quick, and of course, it also opens up the deep shot to the receivers. And Florida State was just missing all of that last year. They couldn't complete passes in the intermediate. They couldn't run the ball. Their quarterbacks combined for 11 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. So, everything's an upgrade right now, including Gus Malzahn, and I'm kind of excited to see it.
And I think they needed a veteran voice in the locker room. A veteran, things just fell apart. I think he's a respected guy. He's got head coaching experience. And I think that will help them overhaul just this transformation that they need to undergo. They got rid of a lot of coaches. They got rid of a lot of players. And I think somebody with his experience is going to be very valuable for Mike Norvell to lean on as we go through this, this year after the year after, and see what happens with the Seminoles. Like you said, tough opener against Alabama. I think the way DeBoer said, it's like they have something to prove, yada, yada, but Alabama knows they're going to walk on that field with more talent, and they should handle Florida State. And then where does the Florida State fan base go from there, especially if it's a disaster in week one? Who else are you looking forward to hearing today? Pittsburgh is one of the teams on the docket that you like to talk about.
Yeah, they probably have one of the best, if not the best, linebacker in the country in Kyle Lewis. He's just an all-around stud. So I can't wait to hear what he has to say. And then Miller Moss at Louisville, not one of the returning starters, but jumping over from USC, lost his job at the end of the regular season, and now he gets to work with Jeff Brom. And if you just look at it, Jeff Brom and quarterbacks tends to work out every time, and so does he develop him into a mid-round NFL quarterback that has incredible success at Louisville? So I think both of those teams will be interesting. Syracuse and Fran Brown in year two. What do they have in store, losing Kyle McCord, but can they build on? I think he's a really strong up-and-coming coach, and to do that at Syracuse in year one, and for them to move on. And then Wake Forest and Georgia Tech in the afternoon. I mean, Kyle Efford is one of the most, I love Haynes King. I love Kyle Efford. When you start your team with two of the toughest players in the conference, that's a good start around Brent Key. So there'll be another interesting story as well today. And I forgot about Wake Forest and Jake Dickert. I know you're probably going to corner him at some point today.
I am working on a story on John Mateer, who he coached at Washington State last year. Mateer is going to start for Oklahoma. I talked to him last week at ACC Media Days in Atlanta. Seems like a good kid, ready for the big stage, trying to turn the Sooners around. Speaking of another power that needs to be turned around a little bit. Syracuse, of course, starting Steve Angeli, most likely. Notre Dame cast off, who did not win the job in the spring. CJ Carr won it. Steve Angeli goes to Syracuse. He will likely start there, and I think he's going to do okay. I mean, we saw little glimpses of him. The Orange Bowl drive, of course, was very important for Notre Dame against Penn State, and it's good for him. Good to see what he's going to, that he gets a chance, and that's the positive side of the transfer portal, is something like that, where you got a kid, he's been at Notre Dame for a couple of years, still can't quite win the job. Now he's going to get a chance to show people what he can do.
Yeah, and I think if he can build on that, and like you said, that success that he had in spots, that Syracuse could be a contender. There is a very large middle class in the ACC, and you can move up and down in a hurry. We talked about Pitt, how they were undefeated, and then all of a sudden they weren't, and things slid away. Syracuse, probably not many people expected them to win as many games as they did in Fran Brown's first season. So, another guy that's learned from Kirby Smart, and Louisville, I think, is kind of that program that has been on the fringe, always ranked in the 20s. Brom, can he push them to the next step? And he'll probably get asked that a little bit today, especially with players that he has coming back. Or are they just going to be that kind of perennial 9-3 team that gets close but is always on the outskirts? I'm not sure where they finished in the final college football playoff rankings last year, but that's a team that's always kind of right there, and they were a team that took it to Clemson last year, and not too many people can say that. So, yeah, and Brom's pretty, straightforward guy on the podium. I do remember that from his days at Purdue.
Speaking of Clemson, tomorrow we get Clemson, Dabo, of course, Cade Klubnik, the superstar quarterback of the league, and one of the returning starters that we'll get to in the Trocchi trivia question. And we've got Mr. Bill Belichick. I don't know if you heard, but he's coaching North Carolina this year, Bill. And he is going to give his first ACC Media Day appearance. And I think that will be the story for tomorrow.
Yeah, it's crazy that they paired those two together. I would have maybe thrown one of them out there today. Clemson, obviously top 5 team, feeling like a national championship contender, not just an ACC championship contender. And this is the first time in probably since the 2019 game against LSU where we can actually say that. They've got all the pieces. They've got the 3-year starter at quarterback. They've got 5 players in our top 50. They've got depth on the defensive line. They've got receivers. Antonio Williams will be here. They've got a loaded deck this year, and I think Dabo knows it. So it'll be the thing there is, does he downplay that or does he kind of hype it up? So those are the two things we can look for with Dabo is what kind of Dabo are we getting? And I'm sure he'll be great as usual. And then Belichick and everything, that comes with Belichick, including his girlfriend, where everybody's going to be staking out the hotel looking for her. But I'm actually more interested in what he says and what his demeanor is. He's world famous for his ways with the New England Patriots over the years, but is he actually open here? Because I think that will be the most crowded podium we see. None of them were overly crowded yesterday, but I think this one will be the one that you'll have to see how many people come in there, and everybody's probably going to write about that tomorrow, including me.
So Belichick, a longtime follower here for 20 years, New England, could, be very standoffish, obviously, in press conferences, didn't want to give away any secrets, mumbled a lot, did not engage, except every once in a while, especially on Fridays when the hay was in the barn, he would talk to the reporters who showed up, special teams questions, that kind of thing, like to talk about the history of the game. He did have this other side to him where he could engage and be, funny and give good answers and things like that. I do think he realizes it's in his best interest to bring that personality tomorrow and try to be as lighthearted and engaging as he can. Recruiting matters, perception matters more in college and NFL. NFL, it's all about W's and L's, and that's it. And he could get away with that kind of stuff. So whether his media consultants, whether his girlfriend, as one of them, gets that message across to let him loosen up a little bit around the media and have some fun with things, we'll see. I know he's capable of it. We'll see if he chooses to do it. So, all right, before we got to get down to, so did you want to add something on Belichick too? Oh, you're on mute. You got muted.
Sorry, I was letting. Yep. No, I'm here. So I was just saying that the other side of him will be important here, because I think he doesn't. If I'm North Carolina, I don't want to write a bunch of negative things, because all these questions are, how long is he going to do this? And and they're not exactly. We were talking with some of our colleagues last night. They're playing TCU in week 1, and TCU is going to be good. They closed the season very strongly last year. And Josh, just because Dion beat TCU 2 years ago means that has no bearing on the TCU team that North Carolina is going to see in week 1 with an experienced quarterback in Josh Hoover, and then they play Charlotte in week 2. So is this an actual coaching job, or is this just an experiment, or is this just a kind of an internship until he goes back to the NFL? All of those questions are fair, and I think those will be, as somebody that's sitting in a couple of his press conferences, I know that it could go either way. So that's what we'll see tomorrow. It'll be different than Mac Brown. Mac Brown was probably the easiest press conference in the world because it was every answer. It was almost hard if you didn't get your question in because his answers were so complete that if you didn't get that 10 to 12 questions in, you might not get one in because Mac was that good.
So before we get back to the Trocchi trivia, before we go downstairs for more press conferences, let's touch on what happened out in Las Vegas yesterday. Of course, the Big Ten Media Days are also going on at the same time. Tony Petitti made his pitch, again, made his case for the automatic qualifiers. The committee doesn't know what it's doing. Everything needs to be decided on the field. It involves more teams. If you're 8-4, 667 winning percentage, you should get into the postseason. That's true across sports, things like that. I don't know how well received it was. You've been around ACC, milling around the last day and a half. Do you what's going on with the CFP? I think you heard Phillips is a little bit involved, talking to the commissioners in the SEC and the Big Ten. It doesn't look like they agree. That's no secret. And do you think we'll have a 12 team in 26?
I do. I think we're not getting any closer to a 16, and just from a couple sources I talked to, it sounds like they're so far apart, and they're publicly saying these things. I think Jim Phillips is trying to be a middleman and trying to bring the SEC and the Big Ten together. But Tony Petitti, this automatic qualifier thing is, and I'm the biggest Big Ten defender in the world. You know that. I just don't agree with them here. I don't think it's good for the game that you get 4. And talking, and I know every conference looks for them out for themselves first. Why? I was getting some conversation here the other night, and it was like, why should the ACC settle for 2? That was like they had 2 in the 12-team format. Why should they do a 2 automatic? And if anything, they were like, we should get 3, and the Big 12 should get 1. So it just moves downhill. It's the ACC's taking shots at the Big 12. The SEC and Big 10 are taking shots at the ACC. And here we are on day 3, no closer to a 16-team playoff. And I think, actually, the more I kind of put some thought into it, that maybe we just see how the 12-team goes for a little bit. With the straight seeding model, does it work? I still don't like the idea of, I'm still not an automatic qualifier guy, but if you're going to have those 5 automatic qualifiers, do it. And the one thing that I'm telling you is going to happen, and the angst is going to come, is every year Notre Dame makes the playoff, they're not taking one from the ACC or the Big 12 or the Group of 5. They're not taking that spot. They are taking a spot from an SEC or a Big 10 school every year. And I think the more times that happens, the more anxious those conferences are going to be, and maybe they'll start working together a little bit. But it does sound like we're no closer to the SEC going to 9 games, just like we're no closer to the Big Ten relenting on this idea of getting 4 automatic qualifiers, which I think is absurd.
All right, so let's get to our Trocchi trivia question. I think that's the question. How many teams are welcoming back their returning starter at quarterback? You're welcome to look at the standings as you do this, but see if you can name how many teams.
I got 5 of them, and I'm struggling with the 6th one. Klubnik, Jennings, yes. Kevin Jennings, Haynes King
at SMU,
Haynes King, Georgia Tech, Kyron Drones, Virginia Tech.
Yes.
Eli Holstein, Pitt.
Yes.
And I feel like this next one's going to be obvious, but I'm drawing a little bit of a blank on the 6th one. Virginia's quarterback isn't back, right? Chandler Morris, is it him or he transferred this year? Let me look at the stand. Give me one quick peek at the standings.
You're 5 for 5. You're off to a great start. And this guy didn't start every single game, but I think he is considered a returning starter.
Oh boy,
it's a tough one.
Is it I don't know. I'm thinking it's Stanford's quarterback, but I'm drawing a blank.
Nope, C.J. Bailey from NC State.
Yeah, that makes sense. So
he took over. Yeah.
So, well, 5 of 6. That's
5 of
right.
6 is very good.
NC State also, I believe they're on the podium today as well. Or tomorrow. So, loaded Wednesday, loaded Thursday. It'll be a good time. And then when we get home, it'll be like 1 month away till kickoff. We're already there.
Excellent. So, all right, we'll get downstairs, start talking to some players, start talking to some coaches. Thank you to everyone for listening to the CFB Nation All-America podcast and watching. Thank you to Irish Breakdown, your source for Notre Dame football information. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you soon.